Recently, I've made it one of my side quests to find plugins that support MTS-ESP as a master or client. An MTS-ESP master is a plugin that can define the tuning system of your project. For example, I was able to make this beat in 17 Edo because of the plugin Pitch Grid that I also reviewed in a video recently. I also updated one of my own free plugins to act as an MTS-ESP master lately. More infos in that video. An MTS-ESP client is a plugin that uses the tuning system that was defined by the master, mostly big synths like Serum 2 or Surge XT. This is where I see the problem. As long as MTS-ESP is not implemented in most plugins that calculate frequencies from notes, you have to limit yourself to specific plugins in order to use the technology to compose an alternative tuning systems. Gladly, I have recently been told there is another great plugin with MTS-ESP support. It's called Pianoteq and it's known to be the piano VST instrument with the best sounding physical modeling engine out there. I was always side-eyeing this plugin for that reason, because physical modeling is awesome. Instead of wasting many gigabytes of hard drive space for a bunch of samples that are cross-faded poorly through various velocity steps, expressions and round robin, a physical modeling instrument synthesizes the sound from pure math and even reveals unique expressive parameters in the process. For example, check out this dampening control. But Pianoteq is not only known for that, but also for its microtonal editor, in which you can add an offset to each pitch class to add temperament. I like this workflow because it enables you to figure out a tuning system causally without thinking of exact numbers or the underlying math. But it has one big flaw: it does not exceed the Pianoteq instance. So if you are running the plugin in a project that has more instruments than just Pianoteq ones in it, you are out of luck. You are basically working with multiple different tuning systems at the same time, which might not always be desirable. I was looking through the manual and the description of the plugin on the website, and MTS-ESP support was not mentioned at all. So if a friend didn't tell me that this feature actually exists, I wouldn't have noticed. But when I found out about it, I immediately reached out to the ModArt devs and asked for an exclusive license in return for this video, so you could consider this sponsored content, because obviously they agreed. Oh, have I mentioned yet that I'm neither a pianist nor a keyboard or synth performer? To be quite honest, my skills on the keys are mediocre at best. You might not think at first a plugin like Pianoteq suits me, but you couldn't be more wrong. When I created this beat, I was overjoyed by how easy it was to add a sense of naturalism to my music simply by using this instrument, because it tries to keep things within the sweet spot of pianos while actually exceeding a piano's capabilities in many ways. In the following, I will show you some examples of how I use Pianoteq 9 in this beat. The most obvious thing to talk about first is obviously this track that I called Tail, because it plays this piano arp that is going through the whole beat and basically defining the atmosphere and chord progression of everything. Before getting started on the actual Pianoteq instance, I have to tell you one thing. Because I told you that I'm not a performer, but I do have MIDI keyboards, and before I actually typed this into the piano roll, I was just playing around with my keyboard. And just trying different melodies, trying different velocity steps as well, because with a physical modeling emulation plugin like this, you really want to make use of the different expressions that you can get out of there in various ways, like velocity, sensitivity is the most obvious one. So even when you're not a performer, it's important to use experimentation on the keys to figure out what kind of mood you can create with this instrument. But yeah, then I definitely typed it into the piano roll with my mouse so that it is perfectly on the grid. And what I like to do then is to use the MIDI humanizer of Bitwig to center it around the grid but make it loose. The difference between actually playing it loose and using a MIDI humanizer is that it will be different every time you loop the sequence when it's done with the MIDI humanizer, which is cool for my mindset, because then it's like an endless performance and I'm not settling into a specific expectation on where it is in the timing, which would trigger my perfectionism. So it's kind of cool that this feels more like an ongoing performance when I'm doing it like this. I like that. Another thing that I did here, you can already see it, there is an automation on this velocity curve module, which is starting at the perfectly flat response, which means that it maps all of the velocity steps to themselves. But then the more it goes on, it will get more intense because more of the velocity steps will be mapped into the higher range of velocity. And that makes the piano a little bit stronger over time, even though we haven't even opened the synthesizer yet. Now in the synthesizer itself, I also have a velocity mapping. What I did here, for example, was I noticed that some of the higher velocity steps can sound quite aggressive and that it's kind of way too easy to get there with my not very velocity sensitive MIDI keyboard. So I kind of made a response that feels a little more round towards the end and makes it a little bit less likely that it hits one of the higher velocities. That was just for playing, and this one is for mixing basically. So I like to have these jobs separated from each other. And apart from that, I didn't make any changes to this patch, which just consists of one of the presets from the Bösendorfer piano instrument pack, the New Age preset, which also contains some reverb, which I found to be quite fitting here. But let's quickly talk about the instrument packs while we are at it, okay? So when you are getting Pianoteq, depending on which version you get, but I got the version that has the microtonal stuff, and because of that I was allowed to choose 3 instrument packs. That was a really cool experience. Like, you have to imagine that usually when you install a plugin, it is just installing some of its default content, and maybe you can buy extra content on the website if you want to, but usually you're just ignoring that and use the general content, and unless you have way too much money or really like some of the extra content. But this developer actually decided to basically say, well, the user should decide themselves what they want Pianoteq to be like. The base Pianoteq experience is not predefined. And when I checked out this workflow at first, I thought, like, why is this so complicated? Why do I have to click on every page and then read a lot of stuff and only find the audio examples down here somewhere? But then I realized that this is really important. It's really part of the mood. If you weren't listening so critically and showed interest in the background story of some of these pianos and the way they were used by other musicians before you, then it would almost sound the same. So I read up on everything that I could find on this page, and I decided for these 3 instrument packs for myself. The first one is the Bösendorfer Concert Grand, because I just found that this piano sounds really nice. Right, it could sound kind of serious, but it could also sound dreamy. I like that. And then the second thing that I chose was the Hohner collection, simply because it is really funky. Check this out. I like all this quirky stuff in between the notes. That's really nice. And this one reminded me of The Doors. And this one is almost like an E-piano, but not quite, and that's good because I don't like E-pianos as much as I like Rhodes and stuff. And yeah, I know none of this is a Rhodes, this is a Pianoteq. Please don't take it too seriously, okay? And the third thing that I chose, actually this was the first thing that I chose, is the Carsten collection. And I chose that not because of the pianos that it has, even though they sound very good. It sounds like it was a little bit more casually recorded, which I liked. Like it was a bit roomy and not super well defined in the high end. Anyway, I chose this set because it has a bunch of harpsichords. And I like harpsichords because harpsichords is like, I think that is sort of the beginning of trance music, honestly. The Baroque times, as you can see, 1680, they were basically having this instrument in their concert halls, the rich and noble people, when they made a party. And they just listened to this single instrument for hours, playing wild arps non-fucking stop. Like, if that is not trance, then what is, right? And that's what I love about harpsichords. Okay, alright, back to my beat. That is what this patch was like. As you can see, it says MTS-ESP 12TET, which means that the tuning editor currently doesn't work. That is because there is an MTS-ESP master in this project, and it's this pitch grid instance, which is in prime limit mode. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you what that means because like I'm not very good at this tuning system logic. I basically only know a lot of stuff about different EO scales and I know how the math works, but the other two I am still exploring. And yeah, 18 steps, and I didn't change anything about these parameters yet, but that is the current state of the tuning system, and if I changed it, then this Pianoteq instance would dynamically react to it. Okay, let's talk about the bass line. So I basically made this bass line in Serum 2, and it has one problem. It had one problem, which is that without the attack, the transient sounds kinda bad. Which is why I added some attack. But now it has no transient at all anymore. So I just decided to use Pianoteq as the transient. Before talking about what I did in the Pianoteq instance, I want to quickly talk about the problem that I had with the composition of this at all. As you can see, these are two unique tracks, and you know that this is not necessary in this DAW. I could just make an instrument layer and put an instance here and then put a Pianoteq instance here and then start working. But the problem is, since we are in an alternative tuning system that might not have exactly 12 steps per octave, we cannot just use note transpose and say 2 octaves higher to get it actually 2 octaves higher. That will just put it 24 semitones higher actually, because this module cannot know that we are in an alternative tuning system. And that made me think that since using MTS-ESP makes it impossible to use DAW-sided transposition features, it would be cool if the synthesizer itself that comes with MTS-ESP support has a feature to transpose its input MIDI before it goes into the rest of the processes. You would expect this to be somewhere here in the tuning area. That is something that I would feature request to be added to Pianoteq. And yeah, that was the reason why I had to make another track and copy the MIDI, because I wanted it to be played on a different octave than the bass line itself, so that the transient is on a higher octave. As you can see, I've loaded one of the harpsichord presets, Mesotonic, and what I did then is I hit the randomizer a few times to get to a different point. Let me demonstrate the impact of the randomizer to you. This one is good too. Maybe I should use both of them? Now the last thing to talk about is this track, which fades in slowly. So as you can see, I made a bit of a funky sequence here, where some of the notes are like very muted and short, and others are being held, and they are playing a little bit of a rhythmical thing mostly. It's a little bit humanized in timing, but very humanized in velocity, so it's basically completely random whether you hear a note or not, but you still hear a lot of it, because somewhere in the end I have a layer where one of the layers is a fuzzploid instance, which goes very hard on the distortion. And in the Pianoteq instance itself, I used one of the clavinet instruments, clavinet overdriven. Yeah, these are definitely my favorite parameters here, but there is more to find out about this synthesizer that I cannot really put my finger on, like this middle section definitely. I don't want to talk too much about these features that I really have no competence in using yet, but there is one parameter that I find very fun, which is this one down here called condition. When you dial it in, then the instance looks more dirty, and the sound of the instrument also gets more worn out. Detuned and wrong, and then it slowly progresses into something that will actually fit to the rest of the music. This can probably be used in a very cinematic way, like when you're making a film and you kind of want to make a transition into a distant future in which everything is dystopian. Just dial in mint from mint to one, and you have something that has some sort of, oh, everything's so run down these days, even though it's kind of a shadow of the past kind of thing going on. And yeah, I'm definitely really digging that. And yeah, what can I say about the microtonal features? They just work. It is just here. It's doing its thing. MTS-ESP is such a nice workflow. Like really, for a lot of years, I've been talking nonstop about how inaccessible microtonality is and stuff, but now there is really almost no excuse left for not using it. Like, the only thing that I can think of is that we are still very limited in instruments. For example, when this ARP dials in, I sometimes feel like there should be a dark Italian Gothic choir or something coming in. Maybe something that could be done with the Kontakt library. Does Kontakt support MTS-ESP? Because if it does, then that might be a reason for me to actually check it out again, even though I don't really like the idea of sampling. Alternatively, I could record some vocals myself, but then I would have to kind of convince Melodyne to use this tuning system as well. Does Melodyne at least have MTS-ESP? I have no idea. So yeah, that is the only reason why you would not want to compose microtonally still. It's kind of hard to limit yourself to the plugins that exist. But I would just say, with every new release that supports MTS-ESP, this is going to become less of a thing. So overall, it's time to upgrade our intervals, I would say.